The crowd pressed in tight around the makeshift auction block, boots grinding dust into the boards as Lena stood tall despite the tremble in her legs. Her hands clutched her swollen belly as if shielding the child inside from the cruelty unfolding outside. A grizzled auctioneer called her like she was livestock. One healthy young breeder, strong hips, about 7 months along. Who will start the bid? The laughter that followed cracked like whips against her pride. Men elbowed each other, throwing out numbers, some more interested in watching her squirm than buying. A coin was flicked at her feet. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, while the morning sun made sweat trickle between her shoulder blades. Her dress clung to her skin, too tight around her belly now, a reminder of the months she'd spent being starved, passed, owned. Behind the crowd, horses shifted and snorted. Children whispered. But one man didn't speak. He stood still near the back, tall, bronzed skin, black braid tied with a strip of blue cloth. His eyes locked on hers, unreadable but unmoving. An Apache. Maybe Lakota. She wasn't sure, but she knew he saw her, not as a commodity, not as shame, but as someone. Rothmer's voice snapped her attention back. Sold. To me. The town's wealthiest trader stepped forward, smirking as he pulled out a stamped note. I need help in my store. A pregnant girl won't run. His words made the men laugh again, but Lena didn't hear the end of it. Her knees gave, and someone caught her, one of Rothmer's men, not gently. Get her in the wagon, he barked. Careful with the goods. The Apache man still hadn't moved, but as Lena was dragged down the steps, their eyes met again, and this time, something flickered between them. A promise? A vow? She didn't know. All she knew was that for one breathless moment, her worth wasn't measured in coin. And somewhere deep in her gut, beneath the fear, a flicker of defiance lit. She wasn't broken. Not yet. As the wagon rattled out of town, the warrior watched until it disappeared. Then, without a word, he turned and followed, on foot, silent, determined. The crowd had already forgotten her. But he had not. Tamak moved like wind through the brush, never rushing, never pausing long enough to be noticed. The wagon tracks were deep and careless, cutting scars through the earth that told him everything he needed to know. Rothmer didn't value what he'd taken. He never had. At the edge of the town, Tamak paused beneath a cottonwood and watched the trader's store from a distance. Inside, Lena was being led past shelves of sacks and crates, her wrists still bound in rope. The way she moved, slow, careful, with one hand on her belly, made something in Tamak's chest twist. This was not his business, and yet he could not look away. He had seen women like her before, sold between hands like cattle, their names erased the moment the bid was final. But there was something different in this girl's eyes. Not just fear, not just sorrow. Fight. That was what had stopped him during the auction. A dozen settlers had called her pretty. A dozen more had joked about what she was good for. But only Tamak had seen the tension in her jaw, the way she refused to lower her gaze. She'd stared through them all, until her eyes found his. Now, Rothmer barked at her from inside the store. You'll earn your keep, girl. My wife's gone. You'll clean, stack, sweep. Don't go thinking that belly earns you rest. Tamak saw Lena's shoulders tense, but she said nothing. Not out loud. But the way she didn't flinch, didn't cry, told Tamak enough. She'd been surviving a long time. He stepped back from the window, disappearing into the alley shadows like smoke. The town didn't see him. They rarely did. Just another savage, they thought. But Tamak wasn't here for their approval. He found an empty barrel behind the saloon, pulled a chunk of dry bread from his pouch, and placed it beside it with a folded blanket. The one his mother had embroidered before she died. He watched from the rooftop as Lena stepped out to dump a bucket of water. She saw the gift. Her eyes darted, searching, wary. She picked up the blanket with shaking fingers, clutched it. For a moment she just stood there, holding the softness to her chest like it was the first real kindness she'd felt in months. She didn't know who had left it, but she looked toward the rooftops, and Tamak knew. She was guessing right. Rothmer's grip on Lena wasn't just physical. It was everywhere. In the clang of the bell above the store door that reminded her she couldn't leave. In the way he loomed whenever she knelt to stack crates, always close enough to make her skin crawl. He never struck her. Not yet. But his words landed like slaps. "Girl, if that baby slows you down, I'll find a midwife to cut it early. Don't forget whose roof you're under. No one else wanted you. Be grateful." Grateful. She bit her tongue so hard one night, it bled. Grateful for being dragged through mud, for her baby being called a burden, for being sold in front of children who now mimicked Rothmer's sneers. The store's back room became her cage. A cot. A bowl. No lock on the door, but she knew better than to run. She'd tried that once. It cost her 2 ribs and the last of her illusions. But there was one thing Rothmer didn't notice. The blanket. She kept it folded under her pillow, the corner with red stitching always touching her cheek as she slept. It smelled of smoke and sage, of a life that wasn't Rothmer's, of someone else's care. And though she hadn't seen the Apache man again, she knew he hadn't vanished. The food was proof. Dried berries one day, fresh cornbread wrapped in cloth the next. No notes, no demands, just gifts. And each time she found one, it steadied her spine a little more. "He's watching," she whispered once to the child inside her. "He sees me." That night, Rothmer caught her humming, a low, nearly silent tune, one her mother used to sing. "What's that?" he growled, storming in. She rose slowly, careful to protect her belly with her arms. "A lullaby." "From where?" "Does it matter?" He stepped closer, nostrils flaring. "You answer when I ask." His hand twitched near her face, but she didn't flinch. That was new. Rothmer saw it, too. He backed away. "You're not as broken as you should be," he muttered. "We'll fix that." She waited until he left, then turned toward the darkened window, whispered to the night, "Not if someone gets to me first." And in the alley below, Tamak's silhouette shifted in the shadows, eyes burning. By dawn, Tamak had mapped every angle of Rothmer's store. When the door creaked, when the backroom lights dimmed, when Lena was let out to fetch water or empty scraps, he didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He watched. Silent, deliberate, unshakable. That morning, he slipped into the trading post's communal garden before light touched the fence posts. No one saw him leave a bundle wrapped in hide beneath the herb box Lena tended. Inside, smoked venison, dried apples, and a carved wooden totem in the shape of a hawk, his clan symbol, a token of protection. A quiet signal. You are not alone. When Lena found it, her hands trembled. She didn't understand the carving's meaning, but the care in it was unmistakable. She pressed it to her heart. "Who are you?" she whispered. Rothmer heard her talking to herself and barked from the porch. "Stop daydreaming. You'll be singing to ghosts next." She bowed her head and moved faster, but inside, something surged. She wasn't imagining him. He was real, and he was close. That night, the town square came alive for the traveling preacher's sermon. Rothmer dragged Lena along to save face. Appearance mattered when you wanted favor from churchmen. She walked quietly behind him, belly prominent beneath her worn dress, eyes scanning the crowd. And there, by the blacksmith's forge, half shrouded in smoke and shadows, stood Tamak. Still as a stone. Watching only her, his presence struck her harder than the sermon's words. The preacher thundered about judgment and fire, but all she could hear was the beat of her own pulse as Tamak nodded once. Small, sure, as if he was saying, "I see you, I know, soon." Rothmer grabbed her wrist when she paused. "Eyes forward, you look like a dog sniffing scraps." But Lena didn't feel like a dog. Not tonight. The totem was still in her pocket. And when the preacher called for anyone living in sin to step forward for repentance, Lena's hand didn't move. Rothmer scowled, ashamed. "Tamak?" He didn't blink. When the sermon ended, the crowd dispersed. Rothmer pulled Lena back toward the store, but behind them, Tamak walked into the church's light for the first time. Eyes locked. No words spoken. But Lena knew. He wouldn't watch much longer. He was preparing to act. The slap came without warning. Lena had dropped a jar of flour while reaching for a broom, the bag slipping from her tired fingers and bursting across the wooden floor. Rothmer's shout split the room before the dust even settled. "You clumsy wretch!" She turned instinctively, arms shielding her belly, but his palm cracked across her cheek so hard she staggered into the shelf behind her. It rattled with the weight of metal tins. "Do that again, and I'll dock your meals for a week," he snarled. "Or maybe I'll sell you back to the next drunk who wants a broodmare." Her vision blurred. Her lip bled. But something inside her refused to break. She rose, unsteady but standing. "You bought labor," she said quietly. "Not my soul." Rothmer froze for a second. He wasn't used to words fighting back. Then he raised his hand again, but it never landed. A strong, unmoving hand caught his wrist in midair. Rothmer wheeled around, face paling. Tamak stood in the doorway, silent as death, his grip like iron. His eyes were locked on Rothmer's, and he said nothing. No threats, no curses, just presence. Rothmer yanked his hand free like it burned. "You don't speak English?" he snapped. "Then I'll say it plain. Get out." Tamak didn't move. He turned slowly to Lena. His gaze softened. He reached into his coat and placed something gently on the counter. A folded cloth with red stitching, the same as the blanket. Her hand flew to her mouth. She recognized it. Rothmer sneered. "You two know each other? What is this, some Indian rescue fantasy?" Tamak finally spoke. "You do not own her." His voice was calm, steady. The room fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Rothmer laughed, but it rang hollow. "Law says otherwise." Tamak's hand hovered near his waist, not on a weapon, but on a pouch. "Your law." He placed another item on the table, a small, polished stone marked with tribal symbols of his people. Then he looked at Lena and bowed his head slightly. Not as a servant, as a warrior honoring a woman's strength. Rothmer stepped back, just half a pace, but Lena saw it. The fear, the first crack. And for the first time since the auction block, she smiled, bloody lip and all. By morning, the town buzzed with whispers. The Apache touched Rothmer's wrist. He spoke English. He gave her something, maybe a proposal. No one knew what had truly happened, but everyone had seen the shift. Rothmer hadn't thrown Lena out. He hadn't raised his hand again. And Tamak? He hadn't left town. That unsettled people more than anything. Outsiders passed through. They didn't stay. But Tamak remained, sitting silently by the well, sharpening an old bone-handled knife with a patience that unnerved even the sheriff. Inside the store, Rothmer barked louder but touched nothing. He avoided eye contact with Lena. He drank more. The scent of sour whiskey followed him like a curse. Lena moved through her chores with her chin lifted, bruised cheek proudly unhidden. Every time she passed the front window, she caught a glimpse of Tamak, still watching, not possessively, but protectively. She began humming again. That same lullaby. A melody not for anyone's ears but her child's. Tamak heard it too. He would pause mid-motion, as if each note carried a piece of a promise he'd already made in silence. One afternoon, as Lena gathered eggs behind the store, Tamak approached the edge of the fence. He didn't speak. He only held something out, a strip of blue cloth from his own braid, now wrapped around a single wildflower. She hesitated, glancing toward the store's back door, then took it gently. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I have nothing to give back." Tamak tilted his head. "You have everything. They just tried to take it." Her eyes filled. She hadn't wept in weeks. Wouldn't give Rothmer the satisfaction. But now, in the stillness of a warrior's gaze, she let one tear fall. "They'll come for you if you don't stop." "Let them," he said. "Let them learn." That night she tied the blue cloth into her hair. When Rothmer saw it, he fumed, but said nothing. The townsfolk noticed, too. Gossip grew like fire through dry brush. Some mocked. Some watched with silent respect. And Sheriff McCrae, chewing the end of his cigar, muttered to no one in particular, "That girl's not alone anymore. And that traitor better start sleeping light." The wind carried the tune of her lullaby that evening, echoing down Main Street. Software defiant. Free. The storm didn't come from the sky. It came in the form of a silver chain. Lena found it tangled in the lining of the old satchel Rothmer had forced on her when she'd arrived. She was looking for thread to mend a torn hem when her fingers brushed the cool metal. She pulled it out slowly, the way someone might lift a memory long buried. The pendant was a worn circle with a name engraved in small, deliberate letters. E. 2 Horses. Her breath caught. Her mother had told her stories of that name once, her grandfather's name, whispered only at night when the windows were shut. "Your blood's mixed," she'd warned softly, "and this land forgets fast." Lena stared at the name now, as if it had just spoken. 2 horses. She had a claim. She had a past that didn't begin with Rothmer's money. That night, when Tamak came to the edge of the fence again, she didn't wait for him to speak. She stepped forward and held out the pendant. "Do you know this name?" Tamak's expression shifted. Slowly, reverently, he took it from her hands and ran his thumb across the letters. "He was my father's blood brother," he said, voice low. "They rode together before the treaties, before the fences." Lena felt dizzy. "Then that makes us not strangers." He handed the pendant back, closing her fingers around it with both hands. "It means this land remembers you, even if men tried to erase it." She swallowed. "Will that matter to anyone here?" Tamak looked toward the sheriff's office. "To him? Maybe. To Rothmer? But to the people?" "Yes, if we show them." That night, under the veil of dusk, Tamak and Lena walked together to the chapel. She wore the pendant around her neck. He carried a folded blanket, embroidered with the same mark carved on the pendant's back. Inside, Sheriff McCrae waited, summoned by a message Tamak had delivered without words. Lena stood in front of the altar, not to pray, but to remember. "I am not property," she said, loud enough for the rafters to carry it. "I am not for sale." She took the blanket and laid it across the bench. The sheriff didn't speak, but he didn't stop her either. Outside, the townsfolk gathered, first out of curiosity, then out of something else. Respect. The past had spoken. And this time, it wouldn't be silenced. The sun rose over a town holding its breath. Word had spread like wildfire. Lena was calling for a public hearing right on the auction platform where she'd been sold. Some came to gawk, some came to jeer, but more came because they felt it in their bones. Something was shifting. Tamak stood beside her, not behind. He wore his ceremonial band across his chest, feathers braided into his hair, the same blue cloth still missing from its usual place, now tied in Lena's hair. She stepped onto the wooden platform alone, the same place where men had once bid over her like cattle. Now she stood straighter, her hands cradling the curve of her belly like a shield and a statement. "You all saw it," she began, voice shaking only once. "You saw them sell me, while I carried life, while I was starving and too tired to protest." Murmurs rolled through the crowd. She held up the pendant, letting it catch the morning light. "This belonged to 2 horses. My grandfather." She turned slowly. "My mother hid it to protect me, but I am done hiding." Rothmer shoved through the crowd. "This is nonsense," he bellowed. "You've been fed lies by this savage." Tamak stepped forward, unrolling a tanned leather document, a tribal record signed by elders, naming 2 horses' descendants. "Her blood is part of this land," he said calmly. "You bought a woman whose spirit cannot be owned." Rothmer scoffed. "She's mine by law." Sheriff McCrae finally moved, stepping up onto the stage with a worn ledger in hand. "Law don't hold when the sale was illegal. No witnesses, no record, no consent." He shut the book with finality. "She's not yours, Rothmer. She never was." Rothmer looked around for support, but saw none. Only faces turned cold. Eyes that once laughed now narrowed. "This is a joke," he hissed, but even his voice was shrinking. Lena looked him in the eye. "You took everything, but you didn't break me. And today, I'm not leaving in shame. I'm walking off this platform free." She turned to Tamak. He offered his hand, not to take, but to walk beside. She took it. And the crowd, stunned into silence, parted for them as they stepped down together. No one cheered, no one clapped. But they watched. And they remembered. Freedom always demands payment, and Tamak knew his would come due the moment he stepped off that platform beside her. By sundown, Rothmer had filed charges: inciting disorder, interfering with property, threatening a citizen. Sheriff McCrae read them aloud with a disgusted sigh. "He knows these won't hold," he told Tamak quietly, "but he's betting you'll leave before it goes to trial." Tamak didn't answer. He sat outside the chapel, sharpening his blade not for violence, but because it calmed him. Lena sat beside him, the pendant heavy against her chest. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. "You gave me back my life. You don't owe me yours." Tamak looked at her, not with fire, but with steadiness. "I stay because this is the land of my mother's bones. And now, it holds your voice too." She reached for his hand, fingers brushing the calluses and scars. "You'll be hated for this." "I already was," he said, "but now they'll have to hate me for something true." That night, townsfolk began to change. A woman brought bread. A young boy, once caught mocking her, now left a single blue wildflower on the chapel step. And when Rothmer stormed through town demanding signatures for Tamak's arrest, most refused to meet his eyes. "She's kin to 2 horses," the blacksmith muttered. "Let the girl be," Rothmer hissed. "This town's gone soft." "No," said the preacher. "It's waking up." At dawn, Tamak stood before the sheriff's office, waiting for the inevitable summons. Instead, McCrae stepped outside with a small paper and a nod. "Council met last night, voted to dismiss all charges." He handed Tamak the torn, unsigned warrant. "You're free." Tamak looked to Lena, who waited beneath the cottonwood tree, hands resting on her stomach, eyes bright with unshed tears. They chose right, she said. They chose justice. Tamak shook his head. Number. They chose a story they couldn't ignore. You told it. She stepped forward, placed her forehead gently against his. Then let's write the rest together. That evening, as the sky bled orange over Dry Creek, Tamak began carving a new sign above the chapel's old door. It read, "The platform no one owns." A space where stories could be told, not sold. A space they had made at a price, but one worth paying. They came from 3 towns over to see the place where it happened. The auction block turned sanctuary, the girl who walked off it unowned, the warrior who didn't speak loud but made the world listen. By the first frost, the platform had been rebuilt, not as a stage for bids or sermons, but as a place where no voice was drowned. Tamak carved symbols into the railings, each one a mark of a tribe, a name, a woman who once stood alone and would never again. Lena sat beside him most evenings, wrapped in the same red-stitched blanket, her hands resting on the swell of her belly, now full and ready. People no longer whispered behind her back. They greeted her by name. Some asked about the pendant, and she told them. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. It belonged to someone who mattered. So I would remember that I do too. When the baby came, it came fast. In the chapel, with the fire burning low and Tamak holding her hand, Lena brought a daughter into the world. They named her Mika, New Moon in his mother's tongue. Sheriff McCrae came by the next morning with a book of land records. The council agreed, he said, placing it beside her bed. This land's yours now, the platform, the chapel, all of it. Lena didn't speak for a long time. She simply stared at the child in her arms, the warrior at her side, and the view beyond the window where the town had once looked away, and now looked to her. That Sunday they held a gathering. No sermon, no trading, just silence. And then, one by one, women stepped up to the platform. A widow who'd lost her home, a girl nearly sold at the mine, a mother whose boy had been taken for labor. They spoke, not because they were invited, but because now they could. And Lena, holding Mika close, watched it all from the front pew, her fingers stroking the pendant that had brought her voice back. She had been sold, bruised, silenced, but not forgotten. And now, she was the one they listened to, the one they followed, the one who proved that even in the cruelest corners of the West, freedom could stand tall. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support more emotional storytelling here on Echoes of the West. If you had seen her on that platform, would you have looked away or stepped forward like Tamak did? Tell us in the comments below.